There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to live forever, to be chosen. I was 15 years old when my name was spoken by the chaplain. His voice rolled like thunder through the assembly hall, rattling in my ribs as if the emperor himself had reached into my chest. You. That was all he said. One syllable, but it sealed my fate. Around me, the other boys bowed their heads. Some whispered prayers of gratitude that their names had not been called. Others looked at me with jealousy, hatred, or awe. I could barely hear them. My ears rang, my vision swam, and my legs felt heavier than stone. The chaplain's black armor gleamed beneath the torchlight, every purity seal hanging like a judge's sentence. Behind him, 2 initiates stood, their helms fashioned with the skull masks of death. They carried chains and manacles. I thought, foolishly, that they might use them on me if I resisted. Resistance was unthinkable, though. To refuse the summons was to be branded heretic and cast into the dust. None refused. None lived who tried. I walked forward, my boots dragging against the stone floor of the fortress monastery's outer hall. This was not a volunteer's stride. It was the shuffle of a prisoner condemned to execution, though execution might have been kinder. My father's face blurred in the crowd, shadowed by grief. My mother clutched my younger sister close, whispering prayers. I wanted to say something to them, anything, but my throat closed. I realized then, words no longer belonged to me. The chaplain's skull helm lowered, meeting my eyes. Behind that mask was not a man, but the will of the chapter, the will of the emperor, incarnate in ceramite and steel. He raised his crozius and spoke. From this day, you are no longer son, nor brother, nor child. You are aspirant. You will suffer. You will endure. And you will either rise, or be unmade. A cold iron collar was clasped around my neck. The chains tightened. I was pulled forward, away from my family, away from the life I had known. The hall's great adamantine doors opened with a groan that shook the ground. I crossed the threshold into a darkness lit only by the torch carried by one of the initiates. That was the moment my life ended. Or perhaps, the moment a new one began. The road was long, and the fortress smelled of incense and oil, of old blood ground into stone. My stomach churned with fear, but I forced myself to walk upright. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I clung to the memory of my father's eyes. He had once told me the Imperium rewards only strength, and strength was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. If I showed weakness now, even in posture, I would be remembered for it. The chaplain led us deeper into the fortress, where other boys shuffled in chains ahead of me. Some were taller, broader. Others were gaunt, their eyes hollow. We were all chosen, but that meant nothing yet. Chosen was only the first cut. Many of us would never see the second. We reached the Hall of Trials. Its ceiling vanished into shadow. The air was cold and smelled faintly of ozone from ancient machinery. On the walls hung banners older than any city I had ever known, depicting heroes of the chapter who had long since turned to dust. Their eyes seemed to watch me, to weigh me, to measure me against the impossible standard they had set. Look, the chaplain commanded. We all obeyed. These are your betters. Your forebears. Their blood is the only reason this world still breathes. You will honor them, or you will join the forgotten. He struck the floor with his crozius, the sound booming like cannon fire. Kneel. We knelt. The chains rattled. My knees hit the stone, and pain lanced through my legs, but I did not cry out. Around me, I heard muffled sobs. One boy beside me vomited from the stench of the incense and fear. The initiate nearest him yanked him up by the hair and slammed his face against the floor until blood ran from his nose. The chaplain's voice did not rise, did not fall. It remained steady, colder than iron. This is mercy. You will be broken here, in body, in spirit. We will scour you of weakness, burn it from your flesh, purge it from your soul. If you endure, you will become more than human. You will walk as an angel of death. If you fail, you will be cast aside. No grave. No name. Forgotten. The emperor has no use for the weak. His words echoed in my skull long after silence fell. The chains were removed, but freedom was an illusion. The trials would begin with the dawn, they told us. Tonight, we were to sleep in the stone barracks, a vast cavern carved from the mountain, lined with iron bunks. The air was damp, each breath frosting in the cold. There were no blankets. No comfort. Only silence broken by the sound of boys trying, and failing, to pray themselves to sleep. I lay awake, staring into the blackness. My heart pounded with dread, but beneath it, something else stirred, a terrible, dangerous spark. Hope. Hope that I might endure, that I might rise, that I might become one of them, a space marine. And in the depths of that cold, merciless night, I swore that no matter what they did to me, I would not fail. They came for us before dawn. A voxhorn screamed through the barracks, a screech like tearing metal. My eyes snapped open, though I hadn't slept. None of us had. The sound seemed to dig into the marrow of my bones, rattling my skull until I staggered upright. The air was damp, cold, and thick with the stink of unwashed fear. "On your feet," barked a voice. A figure loomed in the doorway, black armor catching the torchlight. It was the initiate who had blooded the boy's face last night. His skull-faced helm glared at us with eyeless judgment. "Form ranks. Now." We stumbled, scrambled, shoved one another to obey. There was no order yet, only desperation. Dozens of us gathered in uneven rows. Some still wept silently, others stood trembling. The initiate walked among us, chain dangling in his gauntleted hand like a farmer inspecting cattle before the slaughter. He struck down one boy who hadn't moved quickly enough, dropping him to the floor with a blow that cracked teeth. "Failure begins with hesitation," the initiate hissed. "Remember this." When he was satisfied, the chaplain entered. The room itself seemed to shrink around him, the weight of his presence pressing down like gravity. His crozius clinked against his thigh as he paced before us. He did not shout. He never needed to. His voice carried with the authority of centuries. "You are no longer of the world you came from," he said. "Your family, your home, your past, dead. If you cannot cut those ties, they will drag you down to the pit. Look back, and you will fall." The words struck harder than any chain. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. I wanted to look back. I wanted to see my father's stern eyes, my mother's prayers, my sister's laugh. But I knew the truth. They were already gone. We were marched from the barracks into the mountain's gut. The fortress monastery stretched in endless stone corridors lit by burning braziers. Carvings of angels and skulls glared down from the walls, their faces both holy and terrifying. The air tasted of incense and iron, of oil from machines older than memory. At last, we reached a courtyard open to the pale morning sky. The ground was gravel, slick with frost. In its center stood a massive stone statue of a space marine in full plate, bolter raised, purity seals fluttering from its armor. Beneath his feet were carved the words, "Through death, life eternal." We were lined up in rows before the statue. Other initiates watched from the edges, helms faceless, hands gripping shock mauls. The chaplain raised his crozius. "This is your first trial. You will run. You will bleed. You will not stop until your body fails. And when it does, you will keep running." One boy whispered a prayer under his breath. Another glanced sideways, eyes wide. The chaplain's gaze turned to them, and though his helm was impassive, I could feel his contempt like fire on my skin. "Begin." A horn blared, and we surged forward. Gravel bit into my boots, cold air seared my lungs. Around me, the sound of dozens of aspirants gasping, panting, stumbling. The initiates shouted from the sides, striking anyone who faltered with their mauls. One boy tripped. The crack of electricity lit the air as a maul slammed into his back, leaving him convulsing on the ground. I forced myself onward, each step a hammer in my chest. My legs burned, my throat was raw, but I kept running. The statue loomed above, its eyes accusing, demanding. I thought of my father's words again. Strength is mastery of fear. If I fell, if I faltered, his disappointment would echo even beyond the grave. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time lost all meaning in the rhythm of boots on stone, breath in my lungs, blood in my veins. Boys collapsed around me, dragged away by initiates. Some screamed, others went silent. The numbers dwindled, and still the chaplain watched, unflinching, as if sculpted from the same stone as the statue behind him. At last, my body betrayed me. My legs buckled, and I fell to my knees, gravel tearing my skin. Pain flared in my chest. For a heartbeat, I thought it was the end. But then I remembered the chaplain's words, "Through death, life eternal." I forced my hands against the ground, pushed until my arms shook, and rose again. I ran. I did not know how long I lasted after that. When the horn finally sounded, only a fraction of us remained standing. My vision swam, black at the edges, but I stood. Blood ran from my knees, my hands, my lungs felt aflame, but I stood. The chaplain raised his crozius. "You have endured the first cut," he intoned. "Know this. It was nothing. The trials to come will make this pain seem like comfort." I swayed, nearly collapsing, but pride held me upright. Around me, broken boys were dragged away into shadow. I did not know if they would live to see another dawn. But I had. For now. The next dawn came without light. We were marched into the mountainside again, deeper than before. The stone walls pressed close, sweating with moisture, lit only by sputtering torches that cast our shadows tall and crooked. My body ached from the run, my muscles screamed, my lungs felt raw, but weakness was forbidden. If the chaplain or his initiates saw a stumble, they would strike. If they smelled hesitation, they would destroy it. At last, we entered a vast chamber with a ceiling lost in smoke. The floor was iron, scratched with claw marks and stained black from blood long dried. It was here, we were told, the true trials began. The chaplain stood before us, his crozius in hand, a silhouette against the glow of braziers. His voice rang like thunder on iron. "Strength of body is nothing without strength of will. Today you will prove both. Each of you will face the trial of pain, the trial of fear, and the trial of endurance. Fail in any, and you will not leave this hall alive." The initiates moved among us, separating boys into groups. I was shoved into a line with 6 others. One had fresh blood drying beneath his nose from yesterday. Another was trembling so violently his teeth chattered. We exchanged no words, only hollow stares. We all knew speech was wasted here. The first test began immediately. The trial of pain. Iron frames hung from chains, cruel devices fitted with barbed restraints. I was forced into one, my wrists locked above me, ankles shackled. The initiates fitted electrodes against my chest and skull, humming with stored power. When the chaplain gave the command, the current surged through me. Agony like I had never known tore across my body. My muscles clenched until bones creaked. My jaw locked. The taste of iron filled my mouth as my teeth cut my tongue. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my throat. This was no simple torture. The shocks came in rhythms, designed to break thought, to scramble memory. Faces flashed before me, my mother, my sister, my home. All were drowned beneath white fire. My body shook until I thought it would shatter. And then it ended. The shackles released, and I collapsed to the iron floor. My limbs twitched like dying things. I forced myself onto my knees. Around me, some aspirants lay unmoving, their hearts burst, smoke curling from their lips. Others sobbed, their resolve broken. An initiate's boot crushed one boy's skull without hesitation. No weakness tolerated. No mercy given. When my legs held, I knew I had survived the first cut of this day. The second test began at once. The trial of fear. We were led into a side chamber, its walls smooth, its air stifling. One by one, we were shoved inside pitch-black cells no larger than coffins. The door slammed, and silence swallowed me whole. At first, I thought it was just darkness. Then came the whispers. They crawled into my skull like worms, voices that spoke with my father's tone, my mother's prayers, my sister's laugh twisted into mockery. They told me I was worthless, that I would fail, that I was already dead. Then came the visions. Eyes opening in the dark, countless and hungry. Claws scraping just beyond reach. The stench of rot, the sound of teeth grinding. I knew it was the warp, or perhaps only its shadow, summoned by the chapter's devices. But knowing meant nothing. My heart thundered like a drum of war, my breath shallow, my hands clawing against the walls as if I could tear my way free. I wanted to scream again. But I remembered the chaplain's voice. If you cannot cut those ties, they will drag you down to the pit. I forced myself to stillness. I pressed my back against the wall, closed my eyes, and whispered a prayer to the Emperor. Let me serve. Let me endure. Let me be more. The whispers clawed at me, but I clung to the words until time itself lost shape. When the door opened, I staggered into the torchlight, drenched in sweat, shaking, but unbroken. Not all could say the same. One boy clawed at his own face, shrieking about the eyes in the dark. An initiate silenced him with a single blow. The third trial came without pause. The trial of endurance. We were forced into the pit, a sunken arena where the floor was slick with water, mud, and blood. The task was simple: survive. Hunger gnawed at me, exhaustion weighed like stone, but I fought. We all did. Against each other, against the guards' blows, against the pitiless demand of survival itself. Some collapsed from thirst. Others were dragged under and drowned in the mire. Hours passed, maybe days. I endured. My body burned, my mind cracked, but I endured. When they pulled us from the pit, only a fraction remained. Our eyes hollow, our bodies broken, but alive. The chaplain regarded us, his voice colder than ever. Now you begin to understand. The body is clay. The mind is iron. The soul is fire. Only those who burn brightest shall ascend. And in that moment, I realized, this was only the beginning. They did not give us rest after the pit. Rest was a luxury of the unchosen, and we were no longer that. We were dragged, bruised, and half-starved, into a new hall that reeked of oil and ash. The walls were lined with braziers, the flames casting shadows like skeletal fingers across the ceiling. At the far end stood the chaplain, his crozius raised, flanked by initiates carrying blades as long as my arm. "This is the trial of blood," the chaplain said. His voice was neither loud nor soft, it simply existed, commanding absolute obedience. "Your strength has been tested. Your fear has been stripped. Now your loyalty will be proven. To the Emperor. To this chapter. To each other. You will fight, and you will bleed. If you falter, you will die. If you hesitate, you will die. If you show mercy where none is deserved." He let the words hang like a guillotine blade. The initiates pushed us into a wide circle scratched into the stone floor. The ground was scarred with the evidence of countless trials before ours. Grooves from blades, spatters of blood turned black, fragments of teeth ground underfoot. We were paired off without ceremony. My opponent was a boy taller than me, broad-shouldered, with eyes already glazed by madness or terror. In his hand he held a crude training blade, dull enough not to slice clean, sharp enough to cripple. I held the same. "Begin," the chaplain intoned. The boy lunged at me, wild and desperate. His strike was clumsy, but his weight nearly bowled me over. The blade scraped against my ribs, and pain flared hot. Instinct screamed to retreat, to protect, but the chaplain's earlier words echoed, "Hesitation is death." I sidestepped, let his momentum carry him, and brought my blade down across his arm. It bit flesh. He howled, rage replacing fear, and came again. The next minutes blurred into a storm of pain and motion. My world shrank to the circle, the boy's blade, my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. He struck my shoulder, and my arm went numb. I drove my knee into his gut, forcing him back. He swung for my face, and I caught his wrist, twisting until bone cracked. His weapon fell, clattering to stone. The crowd of aspirants watched in silence. No cheers, no gasps, only silence, broken by the boy's ragged breathing. He looked up at me, eyes wide, pleading. His lips formed the word mercy. I hesitated. For the span of a breath, I hesitated. Then I remembered the initiate who had crushed a boy's skull for less. I remembered the chaplain's vow, "Mercy where none is deserved is death." I drove my blade into his throat. The boy fell, gurgling, his blood hot against my hand. The silence thickened, a weight pressing against my skull. My chest heaved, my body trembling. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood over him, blade dripping. The chaplain's voice cut through the silence. He faltered. "You did not. The Emperor accepts your offering." The body was dragged away like so much refuse. The next pair stepped into the circle. And then the next. One by one, boys fought, bled, and died. Some won with skill. Others with blind rage. More fell, broken and discarded. Hours passed. My body numbed to the spectacle. Each death carved another scar into my soul, yet each victory hardened me. When it ended, barely half of us remained standing. We were smeared with blood, our own and others, and silence clung to us like a second skin. The chaplain stepped forward. His crozius burned with light, casting his skull mask into stark relief. "You are no longer children," he said. "You are tools. Sharpened, tempered, blooded. Soon, you will be reforged. Your flesh will be cut, your bones remade, your very soul scoured until nothing of who you were remains. You will endure this, or you will join the forgotten. I looked at the blood on my hands, drying into cracks along my skin. A part of me wanted to weep, to beg for release. But another part, darker, colder, whispered that I had taken my first step into eternity. We were given no time to mourn. The dead were swept away, and we, the survivors, were herded deeper into the fortress monastery. The air grew colder, damper, until every breath carried the stink of iron and rot. At last, we entered a cavernous chamber lit by pale lumen strips, their light barely piercing the gloom. Rows of steel tables stood waiting, each flanked by hooded figures in robes the color of old bone. The apothecaries. The chaplain's voice echoed off the walls. The trial of blood is finished. Now begins the true work. Your flesh is flawed. Your bones are brittle. Your organs insufficient. The Emperor demands perfection. We will make you perfect. We were stripped bare, shackled to the tables like sacrificial offerings. I could feel the cold steel beneath my back, every nerve raw from exhaustion. The apothecaries moved with mechanical precision, their hands gloved in iron and glass. Strange instruments hung from racks above, drills, saws, syringes thick as a man's finger. They began with injections. Needles slid into veins, pumping us full of chemicals that burned like acid. My heart thundered, my vision blurring as my blood screamed against the invasion. Then came the cutting. Flesh was opened without ceremony, ribs pried apart, bones drilled. I bit down so hard on the leather strap forced into my mouth I thought my teeth would shatter. The first organ was implanted, the secondary heart. A cold weight pressed into my chest, followed by heat as it fused with my flesh. Pain spiked, then spread, until it felt like fire pulsed through every vein. My body convulsed. I wanted to tear it out, to die rather than endure, but the shackles held. The apothecary's voice was flat, detached. Subject stabilizing. Hours, or days, I could not tell, passed as one by one, new organs were added. Osmodular, to reshape our bones. Biscopia, to swell our muscles beyond human limits. Laraman's organ, to clot blood before it could spill. Progenoid glands, to ensure the chapter's future. Each cut, each stitch, stripped away what I had been and replaced it with something monstrous. Some did not survive. I heard the gurgled screams of boys whose bodies rejected the gifts. Some burst into seizures that snapped their bones against the restraints. Others bled out, their tables wheeled aside and left cold. No one spoke their names again. When my turn came for the black carapace, the final and most sacred implant, I thought I would die. The apothecary drove needles into my torso, threading cables beneath the skin. The pain was beyond pain, a white-hot void that swallowed thought. My body arched against the shackles as if possessed. Then came the branding, the sacred sigil of the chapter seared into the flesh above my heart. I did not scream. By then, I had no voice left. Only silence. When they unshackled me, I collapsed to the stone floor. My limbs felt alien, heavier, as if every bone had been reforged in iron. I touched my chest, feeling the raised mark of the carapace beneath the skin, the faint thrum of a second heart beating in rhythm with the first. I was still alive, but I was no longer human. Around me, others staggered to their feet, their eyes hollow, their movements uncertain. We had been broken, rebuilt, and branded. The chaplain returned, his skull helm gleaming in the dim light. "Look upon yourselves," he commanded. "You are not what you were. The flesh of men is weak. Yours has been remade. But this is only the beginning. You are still unworthy. You are still aspirants. You will bleed, you will suffer, you will be broken again and again until only the Emperor's will remains within you. And if you endure, one day, you may call yourselves Astartes." I raised my head, though every nerve screamed. For a fleeting moment, I saw not the torment, not the blood, not the bodies that had fallen. I saw the future the chaplain promised, the armor, the glory, the eternity in the Emperor's service. And then the moment passed, and I was dragged back to the barracks, my body trembling, my mind a hollow shell echoing with one truth: I was no longer me. Sleep was no longer rest. It was a battlefield. Every time I closed my eyes, I drifted into a storm of fractured images, fire across endless battlefields, the Emperor's face too bright to behold, and shadows that whispered from the warp. When I woke, my skin was slick with sweat, and my muscles ached as if I had fought for hours. The apothecaries explained nothing. They offered no comfort. Instead, they dragged us from our cells and returned us to the slabs. The next stage begins, one murmured in a voice without warmth. The flesh must accept its new masters. We were cut open again, flesh pried apart to install yet more gifts. The omophagia, which would let us consume an enemy's flesh and steal fragments of their memory. The neuroglottis, sharpening tongue and nose until we could taste poisons in the air. The cataleption node, so we could sleep with half our brain awake, never surrendering vigilance. Each addition came with agony beyond comprehension. At times I felt my mind sliding loose, my soul unraveling beneath the weight of the Emperor's demands. But the chaplain's voice always dragged me back. Weakness is death. Pain is proof. The Emperor protects. And then came the chemicals. They forced them into us by the vial, thick syrups that scorched the throat, black ichor that boiled in the veins. My stomach rejected it, but rejection meant death. They beat us if we vomited, and some aspirants were simply dragged away when their bodies collapsed. One night, after another round of injections, I fell into darkness deeper than any dream. I was floating, weightless, in a sea of blood. Faces swam past me, my mother, my brothers, the friends who had died in the trials, each whispering, each accusing. Then their faces twisted into skulls, and behind them loomed something vast, something terrible, with claws like scythes and eyes like suns burning out. I woke screaming, but the apothecaries only marked something on their slates and strapped me down again. The next trial was not surgery, but the hypno-indoctrination. They clamped metal helms over our skulls, spikes piercing into the bone, wires feeding light and sound directly into our minds. There was no escape. 4 hours, days, or perhaps weeks, they drowned us in the chapter's catechisms, battle doctrines, histories of victories long past. My thoughts were no longer my own. They were burned out and rewritten again and again, until I could not remember the names of my family, only the Emperor's name. The pain of the flesh was terrible. But the loss of memory, that was worse. Yet, slowly, something else stirred. My strength grew. My skin thickened. My senses sharpened until I could hear a rat scurry in the walls and taste the iron in the fortress air. I could lift stones that once would have broken my spine. I was becoming what they wanted, a creature remade for war. But even as my body transformed, the fear remained. Fear of what I was losing. Fear of what I was becoming. In the dim barracks, one aspirant whispered to me, his voice trembling, "We are not men anymore. We are experiments. Monsters." I said nothing, because deep down, I knew he was right. That night, he did not wake. Whether he died in his sleep, or the apothecaries took him, I never learned. And so I endured. Every cut. Every dream. Every drop of black poison. Because in the end, only one truth remained: survive, or vanish. The gene seed ritual is the soul of the Space Marines. Without it, we would be nothing but glorified men, doomed to die like the rest of humanity. I did not yet understand the weight of what was to come, though the apothecary's quiet whispers and the heavy smell of antiseptic filled the hall with portent. We were led into a vaulted chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, the walls lined with the preserved organs of those who had come before us. Each was catalogued, labeled in blood ink and brass tags: lungs, hearts, livers, brains, the genetic keys of a chapter's lineage. The air was thick with the scent of formaldehyde and ozone. I wanted to look away, to focus on anything else, but the sight of the organs seemed to reach into my mind, whispering promises of power and eternity. The chaplain's voice cut through the silence. The gene seed is sacred. It is both gift and curse. You will accept it willingly, or the Emperor will take your soul. I was strapped to the table, my limbs spread wide. An initiate held my head steady while the apothecary prepared the first implantation. The progenoid glands came first, the seeds of the chapter's future. Tiny organs, almost fragile in appearance, but they carried the essence of warriors who had fought across the galaxy for millennia. The apothecary guided the gland into my chest cavity. Pain lanced through me like lightning, my lungs convulsing, my heart pounding. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I might pass out. Then the organ pulsed, tiny but insistent, and the agony shifted into a burning heat that spread through my entire body. I could feel it integrating, a living rhythm forcing itself into mine. Next came the secondary heart, followed by the biscopia to strengthen my muscles. Each cut, each suture, each pulse of chemical fire pushed my body closer to something not human. I screamed once, long, guttural, echoed off the chamber walls, and the chaplain did not flinch. Pain was irrelevant. Survival was all that mattered. Hours passed. Perhaps it was days. Time had no meaning. The apothecaries moved with mechanical precision, inserting organ after organ, the omophagia, Lariman organ, occipital enhancements. Each brought new sensations. I could feel my bones lengthen and thicken. My muscles swelled with unnatural strength. My reflexes sharpened until the slightest twitch of a finger felt like a cannon blast. And then came the final organ, the neural implants. Tiny mechanical tendrils were grafted into my brainstem, linking me to the chapter's network, enhancing cognition, reflexes, and perception. For the first time, I understood the price of being chosen. My mind would never again be fully my own. I would think, act, and perceive as the chapter required. The line between myself and the chapter blurred, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a fragment of me clung desperately to memory and hope. I remembered my home, my family, my father's words, "Strength is mastery of fear." I realized the ritual was more than just physical transformation. It was the severing of ties to the life I had known, the final step in becoming something eternal. The man I had been was being burned away, leaving only an instrument of war. When the apothecaries finally released me, I sagged against the stone floor. My body was alien, powerful beyond belief, yet every movement felt strange, as if my muscles had a mind of their own. I flexed my hands, testing the new strength. I felt invincible, but hollow. The chaplain's voice came again. "You have accepted the gene seed. You have embraced the Emperor's will. But acceptance is not enough. You must endure. You must conquer. Only then will you earn the armor, the weapons, the name that will make you a true Astartes." I swallowed hard. Somewhere in my chest, the new organs pulsed in rhythm with my heart, a constant reminder that I had been reborn. And I knew the next trials would push me further than I could imagine. Even as I staggered to my feet, a fragment of terror remained. Not fear of death, that was gone. Fear of losing myself completely. Fear that, in becoming a space marine, I had already begun to die. And yet, a darker, stronger part of me whispered, "I will endure. I will survive. I will become more than human." With the gene seed implanted, the next phase was combat training, and it began immediately. The chaplain led us into the arena of steel, a massive hall whose ceiling vanished into darkness, lined with combat dummies, obstacle courses, and the remains of countless aspirants who had failed before us. The air was thick with sweat, blood, and ozone from the ancient machinery that powered the arena. "Your flesh is no longer weak," the chaplain intoned. "Your mind is sharpened. Now we test your skill. You will fight as you must fight in battle, with precision, with ruthlessness, with the Emperor's will guiding your hand." We were armed with training weapons, power blades dulled for safety, bolt pistols stripped of lethal charge, but the weight of them was enough to challenge even our augmented strength. My body, newly reinforced by Biscopia and Osmodula, carried the weapons as if they were extensions of my own limbs. I felt the power thrumming through my muscles, the pulse of new organs lending an almost terrifying vitality. The training was brutal. Obstacles appeared in rapid succession, walls to scale, trenches to cross under simulated fire, mechanical adversaries striking at angles designed to test reflexes. One aspirant fell into a pit of rotating blades, shrieking before being lifted out, alive but broken. Another tripped, and an initiate's rod struck him across the back, leaving him screaming but determined to rise again. I moved through it all with a focus I did not know I possessed. Every movement precise, every strike calculated. I dodged, parried, countered, and pressed the attack, muscles and reflexes responding without thought. It was as if my body had been pre-programmed for this, a living weapon. The chaplain circled, observing with the unflinching gaze of judgment. Then came the sparring matches. We were paired with other aspirants in close combat, forced to anticipate and counter one another's every strike. I faced opponents larger than me, stronger than me, but my training, my body, compensated. I parried a spinning kick, countered with a strike to the side of the head, then disarmed and disabled my opponent with the precision of a veteran. Around me, others were less fortunate, falling to the ground with groans, dragged away for medical attention or further punishment. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. I do not know. Time had lost meaning in the rhythm of strikes, blocks, and the pounding of boots against stone. I became aware of one truth. My body could endure anything the chapter demanded. Pain was no longer a limit. It was a tool. Weakness was an enemy to be exploited, whether in myself or others. The final test in the arena was not another obstacle or sparring match. It was a simulated combat scenario. We were divided into squads and led through the darkened halls of the fortress, each corridor rigged with traps, false enemies, and unexpected hazards. We moved as a unit, our senses honed to every flicker of movement, every sound, every scent. A flamethrower dummy ignited around us, searing heat on my face, and I barely flinched. A mechanical orc warrior, half simulated, half real, lunged with a jagged blade. I sidestepped, rolled, and delivered a crippling strike that would have shattered a normal man. My squadmates fell and rose in perfect synchrony, each strike a calculated, deadly ballet. When the chaplain finally allowed us to rest, I staggered into the shadows, chest heaving, muscles trembling. Around me, only the strongest remained. Others were dragged away, screaming or silent, their bodies broken, their minds shattered. The chaplain addressed us one last time that night. You have survived the arena. You have endured the gene seed ritual. You have faced pain, fear, and death itself. Know this, you are no longer mere boys. You are weapons. Soon, you will wear the armor, bear the bolter, and stride into the galaxy as Astartes. But remember, survival is only the first step. The Emperor demands excellence, loyalty, and sacrifice. Do not forget it. As I lay in the barracks later, muscles screaming and bones aching, a strange clarity settled over me. The fear had not gone, but it had shifted. No longer was it fear of death. It was fear of failing the Emperor, of failing the chapter, of failing myself. And yet, beneath that fear, a spark of something fierce and darkly proud began to burn. I was becoming more than human. I was becoming a space marine. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium. The armor fitting was unlike anything I could have imagined. After surviving the trials and enduring the gene seed ritual, we were led to the armory of the chapter, a hall of impossible scale where suits of power armor lined the walls like giants frozen in eternal vigilance. Each set gleamed under pale lumen light, adorned with purity seals, skull motifs, and heraldry unique to our chapter. Today, the chaplain said, you will don the mantle of the Emperor's wrath. You will become living armor. You will become more than human. We were measured, assessed, and adjusted. The power armor was heavier than any man should carry, but with our enhanced musculature, it felt like an extension of our own bodies. Plates clicked and sealed, hydraulic systems hissed as limbs were augmented with servos, and every joint seemed to hum with energy. When the helmet was lowered, the world went silent, filtered through sensors and vox systems. My vision was augmented, my hearing heightened, my reflexes accelerated. Once armored, we were subjected to a combat drill designed to test our mastery of the suit. The arena of steel had been preparation. Now the real test was coordination. Teams moved through simulated battlefields under the watchful eyes of the chaplain and veteran space marines. Last fire simulated the heat of real bolters. Explosions rocked the floor, and mechanical orcs assaulted us from every angle. I felt invincible, and yet, the suit demanded perfection. A misstep would mean injury. A misfire could mean death. I moved with calculated precision, vaulting over obstacles, dodging fire, delivering strikes that crushed servo-enhanced limbs of training drones. Around me, others stumbled. Some were dragged away, their armor damaged or systems malfunctioning. Only the strongest endured. Then came the Vox coordination drill. We were linked through a mesh of neural interfaces to practice battlefield communication. The moment I spoke, my words were amplified, projected to squadmates even across the hall. Commands flowed seamlessly, tactical decisions made in an instant. The chaplain's voice cut through the chaos. Astartes do not shout. They command. Let your will guide the fight. Hours passed, yet fatigue was meaningless. Our bodies were no longer merely flesh. Every movement was amplified by the biscopia, osmodular, and neural implants. Every reflex honed to preternatural speed. I could sense a bullet before it was fired, hear the whine of a servo motor in the distance, feel the heartbeat of the enemy before they struck. At the end of the day, we were lined up in front of the chaplain and the senior apothecaries. Our armor was dented, scorched, smeared with artificial blood, yet we stood upright, unbroken. A select few had earned the right to move forward. Others were deemed unworthy. You have donned the Emperor's armor, the chaplain said. You have become more than men. But armor alone does not make an Astartes. It is your spirit, your loyalty, your endurance, tested again and again, that will determine if you survive the crucible ahead. I flex my fingers inside the gauntlets, feeling the servo assist war with every movement. The suit was alive, a partner in battle. And I realized then, fully, the weight of what had been done to me. I was no longer just a boy who had been tested and broken. I was a weapon, a guardian of humanity, and soon, a soldier who would stride into battle without fear of death. But even in this triumph, a shadow lingered. I had survived, but I was still being forged. The true trials of war were yet to come. And in the 41st millennium, war never ends. After donning the power armor, we were no longer mere boys but instruments of war. Yet the chaplain reminded us that the armor was only the beginning. To truly become Astartes, we needed mastery of every weapon in the chapter's arsenal. The armory of the chapter became our crucible once more, but now the stakes were higher. One mistake could mean injury, or worse, failure to meet the Emperor's exacting standards. We began with the bolter, a weapon designed to fire self-propelled explosive rounds, deadly even to heavily armored foes. Each of us was taught the mechanics of the weapon in meticulous detail. Loading procedures, recoil management, maintenance under fire. Then came drills, rapid fire, moving targets, firing in tandem with squadmates. The air was filled with the stench of gunpowder, the echo of exploding rounds bouncing off stone walls. My senses were heightened by the neural implants. I could anticipate the recoil before pulling the trigger, track every trajectory with precision that far exceeded human capability. Next was close combat, the power sword. Its plasma edge could cut through a tank or a man with equal ease. The chaplain demonstrated techniques, every swing precise, every stance calculated. We practiced relentlessly, striking against training dummies weighted and armored to simulate real foes. I felt the heat of the energy blade in my hand, its weight perfectly balanced by the enhancements of my augmented muscles. Every strike, every block, honed skill and discipline until movement became instinct. Then came the Vox communication drills. We were linked in real time through neural Vox, practicing battlefield coordination under simulated combat conditions. Commands had to be crisp, strategic, and instantly understood. Our reflexes, now augmented, allowed squads to execute maneuvers that would have been impossible for ordinary humans. I could feel my squadmates' intentions as if they were my own, the neural link creating a near-telepathic understanding of tactics and timing. Finally, the chaplain pushed us into a simulation of full-scale combat. Smoke filled the arena. Explosions shook the stone floor. Mechanical orcs, tyrannid simulacrums, and automated defenses tested every skill we had learned. I moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency, dodging fire, returning shots, and striking in coordination with my squad. Around me, others stumbled and fell, some breaking, some exceeding expectation. Every sense, every enhancement, every organ implanted in me over months of trial and agony, worked in perfect harmony. Hours passed like minutes. Sweat and blood mixed with the lubricant of servos and the odor of ozone from discharged energy weapons. My armor bore scratches, scorch marks, and the weight of every strike absorbed. Yet I stood unbroken, my body and mind sharpened into a weapon of war. When the simulation ended, the chaplain approached. You have learned your weapons, your armor, and the bond of the chapter. But knowledge is worthless without experience. Soon, you will see battle. Soon, you will understand that the Emperor demands perfection not just in drills, but in the heat of endless war. As I removed my helmet and exhaled, my body felt simultaneously lighter and more alien. I was no longer merely a human boy. Every organ, every muscle, every neural enhancement was proof of transformation. Yet somewhere deep inside, a faint whisper of the boy I had been persisted, a memory of family, home, and innocence lost. It was fragile, fleeting, yet it reminded me of the cost of what I had become. The chaplain's voice echoed behind me. The time for trials is not over. You are ready to endure the final crucible, battle itself. The first deployment was nothing like the simulations. We were sent to the agri-world of Vestorum Secundus, a planet once fertile and proud, now a scorched battlefield. Chaos cultists had risen, claiming the name of the Emperor for their own twisted ends. Cities lay in ruin, smoke choking the skies. The smell of burning flesh and ozone from last fire filled every corner of the planet. We disembarked from the Thunderhawk gunship in the pre-dawn darkness. My armor hummed with servo assist, and my senses scanned constantly. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every sound a signal of danger. The chaplain walked among us, silent and imposing, reminding us with each step that hesitation would cost lives. Our squad moved like a single entity. Each movement, each command, flowed through the neural voxlink, allowing split-second coordination. A ruined spire to the north housed the cult's leadership. The chaplain signaled the assault. Explosions of last fire and bolter rounds tore through the air as we advanced. My muscles, strengthened and reinforced, carried me over rubble and fallen bodies with unnatural grace. Every strike I delivered was precise, every bolt fired accounted for. Chaos warriors emerged from the shadows, hulking figures clad in desecrated armor, blades burning with warp-tainted energy. The first clash was brutal. I felt the power sword cut through armor as though it were cloth, the servo muscles in my arms responding instinctively to every movement. The chaplain led from the front, Crozius hammer swinging, shattering skulls and bones in rhythm with his footsteps. We pushed deeper into the city. The streets were traps, fire, collapsing buildings, and warp-spawn horrors crawling from the shadows. One of our squadmates was caught in a blast, thrown across rubble. I dove, catching him just before the debris crushed him, feeling the strength of Biscopia and Osmodula saving a life. Around me, the other Astartes executed maneuvers with inhuman coordination, cutting down enemies with bolter and blade. In the heart of the city, the cultists had fortified themselves in a cathedral. Inside, warp energies warped reality, shadows that moved against logic, whispers that clawed at the mind. I could feel the neural implants fighting to maintain focus, every enhancement screaming to counter the psychic interference. The chaplain barked orders. Suppress the warp. Take the cathedral. We stormed the building. The air inside was thick, crackling with psychic energy. Cultists emerged in waves, bolters firing, demonically tainted blades swinging. I moved with deadly precision, feeling the flow of combat as an extension of my body, my mind, my will. I struck, dodged, countered, and advanced. Around me, brothers fell, and I felt their loss even as I pressed forward. Each death was a scar in the fabric of our squad, a reminder that perfection demanded sacrifice. Finally, we reached the cult's high priest. He attempted a ritual to summon a demon, his voice a cacophony of whispers that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I struck first, cutting through his defenses with power sword and bolter, ending the abomination before it could manifest fully. The chaplain followed, ensuring none survived to spread corruption again. When the battle ended, the cathedral lay in ruins, the air thick with smoke and ozone. Around me, my squad was battered but alive. I removed my helmet, breath coming in ragged bursts. Victory was ours, but the cost was clear. Every strike, every moment, had tested the body and mind the chapter had forged. We were no longer boys, no longer human. We were Astartes, living weapons forged in fire, blood, and pain. The aftermath of Vestorum Secundus was a lesson in the true cost of war. We moved through the ruined streets, our boots crunching on rubble and ash, the stench of smoke and charred flesh hanging heavy in the air. The planet sky, once a soft blue, was now a murky grey, streaked with fire and warp-tainted clouds. Silence reigned, broken only by the distant groans of the wounded and the occasional collapse of a weakened structure. The chaplain led us in a silent march to the makeshift command post. His Crozius glinted faintly under the dim light, a constant reminder that we were instruments of the Emperor's will. He spoke only when necessary, his words sharp, precise, like the blade of a knife. The battle is over, he said. But survival is not victory. Every scar, every loss, every lesson must be etched into your mind. The Emperor demands perfection, and perfection requires reflection. We began the grim task of cataloguing the dead. Chaos-tainted bodies were stripped of their armor, their weapons gathered for study. Around us, warp disturbances flickered like shadows at the edge of perception, a subtle reminder that corruption never sleeps. I felt my senses straining, tuned to detect the slightest anomaly, the whisper of warp energy that might signal remaining threats. A squadmate approached, his armor dented and scorched. "Brother," he said quietly, "did you see the priest? His last scream, it felt wrong." I nodded. I had felt it too, the warp trying to claw through reality, trying to reach our minds. But we had endured. We had survived where ordinary men would have fled or been broken. Every implant, every augmentation, every painful ritual had prepared us for this moment. And yet, the memory of screams, the echo of death, lingered. The apothecaries returned to inspect the survivors. They checked our implants, ensured the gene seed had integrated correctly, and treated wounds that the body had miraculously survived. Their faces were expressionless, but the efficiency of their work reminded me of the cold truth. We were not valued as men, but as tools. Yet in that cold calculus, a deeper purpose emerged: survival, transformation, perfection. As night fell, we gathered in the cathedral's ruins, a ghostly silhouette against the dying fires. The chaplain spoke again, his voice reverent and heavy. You have faced the horrors of man and warp. You have survived where others perished. But remember, the galaxy is vast, and threats are endless. Every world, every city, every battlefield will demand the same resolve, the same ruthlessness, and the same loyalty. Complacency is death. Weakness is betrayal. I knelt, armor clanking, and silently vowed to uphold the Emperor's will. My body was no longer my own. It belonged to the chapter, to humanity, to the eternal war. And in that moment, I understood fully what it meant to be a space marine. Not glory, not heroism, not fearlessness, but endurance. Relentless, unyielding, eternal. As the fires of the city flickered in the wind, I felt a strange clarity. The boy I had been was gone, replaced by a warrior forged through fire, blood, and the Emperor's will. Yet, even as the shadow of what I had lost lingered, a darker pride arose. I had survived. I had endured. I was no longer human. I was Astartes. The lessons of Vestorum Secundus were only the beginning. Back at the fortress monastery, we were introduced to the Strategium Chamber, a place where the chapter's campaigns were planned with surgical precision. Hollow projections of war zones flickered above obsidian tables, showing every city street, every canyon, every orbital approach. The chaplain and senior veterans gathered around, discussing tactics in low, clipped tones. You are no longer merely fighters, the chaplain said. You are strategists, tacticians, the eyes and hands of the Emperor's will. Understanding the battlefield is as crucial as mastering the blade. We were assigned simulations designed to test decision-making under pressure. Entire planetary defenses could collapse under a single misjudged command. Neural implants interfaced with the data streams, allowing us to process information faster than any ordinary human. I watched as squadmates made split-second choices, flanking maneuvers executed with perfect synchronization, artillery strikes called in with terrifying precision. Then came the psychological conditioning. Each scenario escalated, introducing moral dilemmas and chaotic variables. Civilians were caught in crossfire, prisoners of war begged for mercy, warp manifestations twisted reality, all designed to teach us to balance compassion with ruthless necessity. One wrong decision would see an entire simulation crumble. The chaplain observed silently, only offering a nod or shake of his head as evaluation. Beyond the simulations, we were trained in the art of infiltration. Silent movement, recon, sabotage. The fortress had hidden corridors, labyrinthine passages, and sentinel zones where shadows merged with darkness. We crawled through mud, over debris, under the watch of sentinel droids. Every sense heightened, every nerve taut, every muscle ready to strike with deadly intent. We also learned the subtlety of diplomacy, rare, but required. Envoys from Imperial Guard regiments and planetary governors visited to discuss combined operations. Even as my body remained a weapon, my mind was being sharpened to read threats, anticipate betrayal, and command loyalty. Night drills pushed endurance to the extreme. Forced marches in full-power armor, under simulated orbital bombardment, with sensors detecting every mistake. Injuries that would cripple a normal man became tests of adaptation. Muscles reinforced, organs enhanced, reflexes accelerated, all forced to function under maximum stress. By the end of the cycle, the chaplain gathered us once more. You have survived the battlefield. You have mastered weapons, tactics, and the mind of war. Yet there is one final test, not of body, not of mind, but of spirit. You must endure the crucible of the warp. I felt a chill. The warp was a living nightmare, a chaos of psychic energy and malevolent intent. Few returned unchanged. But the spark of fear had transformed into something sharper: determination, focus, the cold clarity of a warrior forged to perfection. In the silence of the Strategium Chamber, I realized the truth. Every trial, every implant, every drill had a singular purpose: to break us, rebuild us, and prepare us to face horrors no human mind should endure. And yet, as I stared at the flickering hollows of distant battlefields, I felt the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders. I would walk into the warp and emerge as the Emperor's instrument, unyielding, eternal, unbroken. The day of the warp crucible arrived without fanfare. We were led to the meditation spire, a towering structure whose spire disappeared into the clouds. The air inside hummed with an unnatural vibration, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Psychers, bound by chains and chanting in low voices, prepared the psychic field that would open our minds to the warp, testing the boundaries of sanity and resilience. The chaplain spoke one last time before the trial. The warp is the mirror of the soul. It will show you your fears, your failures, your darkest desires. You will face illusions, visions of death, corruption, and betrayal. Only those who endure the mind unbroken shall emerge as true Astartes. Remember, fear is the weapon of the enemy. Faith is your shield. Loyalty is your blade. We entered the chamber one by one. The psychic field enveloped us instantly. The world dissolved. Reality fractured. I felt the walls of my mind strain and crack as visions assaulted me. My family, twisted by chaos. My friends, slain in unthinkable ways. The fortress monastery itself burning under unholy fire. I heard whispers in voices that were not voices, saw shapes that should not exist. Instinct and training became all that kept me tethered. Neural implants filtered the sensory onslaught. Biscopia and catalepsion nodes kept my body alert even as my mind struggled. I focused on the Emperor, on the teachings of the chaplain, on the rhythm of my own heartbeat, each pulse a tether to reality. One vision struck harder than any weapon. A version of myself, corrupted, standing over the bodies of my squadmates, laughing as the galaxy burned. I wanted to flee, to collapse, to scream, but I remembered the mantra: endure, survive, become. With effort that nearly tore me apart, I rejected the illusion, anchoring myself in truth. Hours passed in this psychic torment. I could not distinguish time. I felt as if I had died and been reborn multiple times, each iteration more harrowing than the last. The psychic field probed every weakness, every memory, every flicker of doubt. But I endured. Pain, fear, hallucination, all became instruments to test my resolve. When the field finally released me, I collapsed onto the cold stone floor of the spire, chest heaving, muscles trembling, mind rattled but intact. Around me, my squadmates emerged, each bearing the same mixture of triumph and horror. Some wept. Some smiled with grim satisfaction. All of us had been changed, forged anew by the crucible. The chaplain surveyed us, his eyes piercing even through the exhaustion and psychic residue. You have endured the warp. You have faced the darkness of your own souls and emerged unbroken. Remember this feeling. Remember the price of survival. You are now fully Astartes, the Emperor's instrument, eternal, unyielding, perfect. I rose slowly, feeling the strength of my augmented body, the clarity of my mind, and the sharpness of my senses. The boy I had been was gone. In his place stood a warrior of legend, tempered in fire, pain, and psychic trials. As I looked to the horizon, the distant glow of battle called to me. This was only the beginning. Endless war awaited. And I was ready. The Emperor's light burns eternal, but at what cost? The weeks following the warp crucible were a test of endurance and integration. We were no longer trainees. We were Astartes, warriors of the Emperor's design. Yet every mission, every deployment, reminded us that perfection demanded constant vigilance. We were sent to Syndralis Prime, a hive world teetering on the brink of collapse, rife with gang warfare, Xenos incursions, and the subtle whispers of chaos corruption. The descent into the planet's polluted atmosphere was tense. Thunderhawk engines roared as we pierced clouds thick with smog and acidic rain. I felt the weight of my armor, the pulse of Biscopia and neural implants, and the eerie calm that comes before unrelenting violence. My squad moved as one, coordinated by the neural voxlink, every step a calculated preparation for the storm to come. The hive streets were a labyrinth of twisted metal, smoke-choked alleys, and collapsing structures. Xeno skirmishers, orcs with jagged weapons and unnatural speed, darted from shadow to shadow. The first clash was swift and brutal. Bolters roared, explosions shattered walls, and power blades met greenskin armor with sparks that danced across the rubble. My movements were instinctive, yet precise. Every strike, every dodge, every suppression fire executed with a deadly artistry born of years of training and augmentation. Chaos cultists emerged, their bodies scarred, ritualistic symbols carved into their flesh. Warp-tainted energy pulsed around them, and the chaplain's croziers hammered down with righteous fury, scattering the enemy in bone-crushing arcs. I followed, striking with lethal intent, my power sword singing as it cleaved through flesh and armor alike. Amid the chaos, a Tyranid scouting party appeared, grotesque and alien, its chittering and screeches echoing off the hive walls. Coordinated through neural link, our squad adapted instantly. Bolters fired, blades struck, and together we executed maneuvers that were a symphony of lethal precision. Every organ implanted, every enhancement fused with the warrior's will, allowed us to react faster than thought. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The streets were littered with the bodies of enemies, the echoes of combat ringing in my ears. Yet victory was never quiet or clean. Each battle left marks, on the armor, on the body, on the mind. My squadmates bore their own scars, physical and mental, reminders that even perfection demands sacrifice. As the hive settled into an uneasy silence, the chaplain spoke. Remember this day, brothers. You have faced Xenos, traitors, and the taint of the warp. You have survived, and yet the war is unending. The galaxy will never know peace, and neither shall we. Each victory is temporary, each enemy replaced by another. I removed my helmet and exhaled, feeling the pulse of my organs, the hum of the power armor, the clarity of a mind honed to perfection. The boy I had been was unrecognizable. In his place was a warrior, eternal, unyielding, and forged in fire and blood. As I looked to the horizon, the glow of distant war zones promised endless campaigns, but also purpose. I was no longer a recruit, no longer a human boy. I was a space marine, an instrument of the Emperor, a guardian of humanity, a soldier forged in agony and triumph. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever horrors the 41st millennium held, I would endure. I would fight. I would survive. I would prevail. Becoming a space marine is not merely a transformation of body, it is the crucible of the soul. From the initial selection, through the trials of gene seed implantation, grueling combat training, and the warp crucible, every step is designed to forge warriors capable of standing against the endless horrors of the 41st millennium. Each organ implanted, each muscle reinforced, each neural enhancement, every psychic trial, and every battlefield victory is a testament to the Emperor's will and the unyielding spirit of the Astartes. We endure because humanity demands it. We fight because the galaxy is unceasingly hostile. Every victory comes at a cost, every action bears consequences, and every war leaves scars, both visible and invisible. The boy I once was has been replaced by something more, a warrior eternal, unbreakable, and prepared to confront threats that no ordinary human could withstand. The transformation is not just physical but spiritual, instilling an understanding that survival requires sacrifice, skill, and unwavering loyalty. The galaxy offers no respite. Xenos, traitors, and the forces of chaos wait in every shadow, on every planet, and in every warp-twisted corner of the universe. Yet, for those who endure the trials, who embrace the Emperor's gift, who walk the path of fire and blood without faltering, there is purpose. Each mission, each battle, each sacrifice contributes to a legacy older than time itself. In the end, being a space marine is more than power, more than skill, more than survival. It is the embodiment of humanity's will to endure against incomprehensible odds, a testament to the relentless determination required to protect the Imperium. I have seen death, fear, and corruption, yet I stand unbroken. I am Astartes. I am the Emperor's instrument, and I will endure, for as long as the galaxy burns.